Welcome back to the Lux Bride podcast, where this week we're going to talk about all of the many plans you need to take in consideration when you plan your wedding day.
Yes. So we've broken it down into 4 different types. I'm going to talk about the first one, which is Plan A. It's the easiest one. It's your dream day. If nothing was a factor, if COVID, weather, nothing was a factor, how would you want your dream day to look, to feel, to have your guest experience, to have your own experience? It's the nicest one, I will say. And I did take that spot away from Alyssa.
Plan B is going to be my realm. This is if things don't go your way. So a lot of times this is when you have a weather factor. So say your dream wedding for your Plan A wedding is to be outside, no tent, the sky is your canopy, beautiful lights around you. Being in Michigan, this is very unrealistic. If you're in California, however, more of a possibility. But we're going to look at the consideration of weather. So you need to have your Plan B be a backup weather plan, whether that's moving indoors, whether that's getting a tent with flooring. You need to look at the season that you're getting married in and make those decisions ahead of time so that you're not surprised if you're last minute scavenging for a tent. You'll have to make that decision at least a week before your wedding, but a lot of times you have to put a deposit down right away from a rental company to be able to have that tent booked for your day. So that's like insurance. You put your money down, hope that you don't have to use it. If you do need to use it, you have it already saved for yourself. So we need to consider that. You also want to look into possibly having heaters or umbrellas if the ceremony's still outside, and maybe a covered structure instead of a tent. Other factors could be high winds, mud if you don't do flooring because it's the earth, and if it gets wet, it could be muddy, as well as flooding. And if it gets cold, if you need that heat aspect. And finally, lightning. Should not be outside if there's lightning. They'd be a huge factor. So those are all the things you need to consider for your backup plan as your Plan B.
Perfect. So Plan C, I don't know, I felt like we kind of did this a little bit ironically, but not so much. Plan C is COVID.
Yeah, Plan C is COVID. Yep. C for COVID.
Exactly. So when it comes to Plan C, obviously things are consistently changing depending on cases, sometimes even by county, et cetera, things like that. So we recommend, and we'll link in the show notes as well as on the blog, where you can find the best state, like what the most up-to-date state regulations on what is happening with COVID. And you are looking at gatherings and events. That is the terminology that you need to look for. And again, that's the other reason why you've got to take some things into consideration as far as guest count, outdoors, indoors, backup plans, not only for weather, but also for what happens if COVID is more severe versus not severe. So that is why the backup plan itself is COVID. We actually also recommend that I found this thing that's basically for save the dates. I'll link it because I don't have the official terminology, but I know that you can find some good stuff on minted.com thanks to what Alyssa has told me. But it's basically like, for you have that first Plan A, right, of all of the guests you want to invite, but COVID might make your guest count go down quite a bit. And so something like, here's our wedding date, please save this date, a formal invitation of the location ceremony, like information will come along, or Zoom information will come along. And that's just kind of a nice way that you can have it be like, okay, well, either we will invite you to the wedding or you can prepare for a Zoom to be on video chat with us. And that way guests can understand, okay, maybe they are on the B list. And it's not because you don't love them, it's just they're on the B list of are they coming or are they not coming?
Yeah, definitely having a wedding website is crucial right now because that's where you can keep people the most updated and informed as opposed to sending stuff in the mail. And I personally have used Evite for a few events because Evite, you can put in people's email and their phone number and it will send you a text notification too.
Oh, perfect. That's awesome. Because the other thing that you've got to pay attention to, which is why all of this information is like a little bit, it's a little bit different with COVID. You're going to need, you know, like less tables. You need more space because you need less tables with more space in between it. And actually something that most of your venues should understand by now, and Alyssa has talked to me about, is the 6 feet of distance is not table to table. It's actually chair to chair, because people pull their chairs in and out because you have to accommodate a person sitting there.
Yeah.
So it's actually from chair to chair that's 6 feet apart. So from what Alyssa, you were telling me, it's, if you want table to table, it's almost easier to adjust by 8 to 9 feet in between each table.
Yep, because every chair usually takes about a foot to 1.5 foot amount of space. Just because a chair can push into a table does not mean it's going to be like that with a human sitting in it.
Right.
It's going to be pulled out completely. So what I do when I'm measuring is I pull the chair out so the edge of the seat ends where the table begins. So it shouldn't like push against a table linen or anything. It should come all the way out. It's so funny because so many people push the chairs in even when they're setting an event. But it's really important to keep the chairs pulled out, and then you can see what realistically space you have from there. And we do that because it should be 6 foot from person to person. So if you do the 6 foot tables and then people are actually 4 foot apart or 3 foot apart, that's still not where we need to be right now. So
yes. And obviously, again, that might change, but that's the recommendation as of now. And I think the other thing that we didn't necessarily talk about yet is for the tables. It's almost easier if you have people sitting together that are already within the same household or they're already within the same pod.
Yes.
Household or 2 is really what it's supposed to be. And then also just having extra masks or hand sanitization around. A lot of my couples, and I know a lot of your couples as well, have literally just bought those mini hand sanitizers. They put a cute label on it. Some of them have just honestly taken the label off and just let it be, and have placed multiples of those on the tables. But you will want some of those to be readily available. So that way you can encourage people to still be very mindful of COVID and whatever regulation is happening.
Yeah, one of my favorites, my bride found an Etsy shop that had FDA grade approved hand sanitizer, because there's a lot of them out there being handmade. They had essential oils in it, and they had their own sticker that they attached on it that included in the Etsy shop that they could just put their name and date and choose what sticker style. Really cute. We put it at every place setting. One of my favorite hand sanitizers. I'm glad she let me take a few extra because that's what I keep with me in my pocket.
Yes. We
had another bride who used fabric masks. She ordered them from Old Navy. You can get an assortment for a set amount in different colors and in shades. And what she did is she ordered plastic bags that were for cookies. She individually inserted every single mask into those plastic bags that were actually cookie bags that sealed. And she did it in a sanitized workstation with her mask on, so that when the guests put on the mask, they were the only ones touching or around it. Sometimes people put out just a box of masks and it's like, well, the next person could have touched the next mask. So I really love that. And people were getting rid of their medical grade mask, like that were just more traditional in the white or blue, and they were putting that over it to be more stylish, or they were, you know, they had already taken on and off the other one so many times. They got rid of that one and put on a new mask. So it made wearing a mask fun and stylish and different. And I really love that they did that too.
Yeah. And I think that, I've had ones where they provided black mask, medical grade masks for everyone, and they put their names and then their wedding date on the end.
I like that.
And they asked each vendor if we wanted one at the very beginning, because we got there really, really early. And we were like, yes, of course we want one.
Yeah, it could be all uniformed in unity.
We feel like, yeah, we want to be a part of this too. Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, another thing to note with tables is, if that's okay if I hop to that one, sometimes people need to anticipate having more tables than they originally thought. Just because if you're doing tables by household, we've had some people do like 4 foot round tables, which are normally like a cocktail table with 4 people sitting at them or 2 people sitting at them, because it's just one household. So that way you don't have to have as many large tables taking up as many space. So like we've had it where it's like a 4 foot, 5 foot, and even 6 foot tables assorted, because you can fit different quantities of people at each of them.
Yeah, and that makes total sense. So that actually also kind of leads us though into, I think, Plan D.
Yes.
And Plan D is weather plus COVID, because again, like you said, you can't necessarily predict the weather and you can't predict COVID. So
no,
working with few of those, but you have a really great example that I want to hear about from AK Rick's.
Yeah.
I want to know about that wedding because I think it's a beautiful example of mixing weather and COVID and still making it happen.
Yeah, so our bride found out that she couldn't have her wedding downtown at a public museum. Yeah. So she had about a month to like figure that out before her wedding. And I was like, you know, give me a few days and let me call like everyone I know and we'll figure it out. I got a hold, like we contacted a bunch of country clubs. We did find some availability at country clubs, but you had to use their own caterer and bartending services there. And she really wanted to keep those that she already hired. So the one place we found, which was AK Rick's clothing store, they have this beautiful event space that they usually do for fashion shows and for luncheons and like new launches for product that is being featured in their store. Mm-hmm. We reached out to them because they have this beautiful outside garden space. They do have this beautiful inside event space, but we weren't able to use that because of COVID. But we got to use their outside garden space, super posh and modern, but gardeny here in the city. So we used that. They were really flexible on letting us put up a tent. And we brought in a mobile bar, which made it really fun user experience. And AK Rick's actually used that mobile bar, a month later for one of their cocktail parties they had outside. And then we had mobile bathroom stations. So there was like 5 in the ladies and I think like 4 in the guys. So it was pretty large and it was like electric unit. That was the only thing that they actually had to go inside to use, which was the bathrooms. Everything was outside. Everything was super safe. We had all the tables spaced out. We did use 4-foot and 5-foot round tables. So some of them are 4 tops. Some of them are 5 or 6 tops. Mm-hmm. Most of it was by people that were already around each other. So like if somebody worked together, they were already being exposed together. If, aunt and uncle went and took care of Nana and grandpa and like they would do shopping for them or with them. So like you put them together as a household. So we had a lot of spacing underneath the tent. I mean, the tent could accommodate 200 people, but we only had 100 people underneath it. That was a state regulation at the time. No siding. We didn't have to have any siding to the tent. It was beautiful in August. So weather didn't really come too much of a factor, maybe a little bit of sun and heat, but because of the tent, we were covered and shaded. So that was nice. We did ceremony outside next to it. We spaced the chairs out about 4.5, 5 foot apart. We couldn't completely get it to the 6 foot apart, but we only had one couple that wanted to be a little bit further apart from everyone else. So we just had pulled them back to the back of, into the side of the ceremony. And so everybody felt really spacious. We asked that people kept their masks on during the ceremony anyways. And so the only time we really had them taking their mask off was once they were, once they got their beverages from the bar station or once they got to their seats, which were really safely spaced out as well. And we were 6 foot apart from chair to chair, not table to table. And having the aspect of bringing in these smaller tables brought us a lot more space underneath that tent. And we were able to minimize the centerpiece design as well for them for flowers. So some were a little bit more lush and extravagant and some were more petite. And it was just more playful because it just gave more variety around the room. And everybody had an overall really positive experience. It was really fun. Everything was outside and safe.
I love that. I think that's so fun too, to see like exactly how you accommodate some things. Like, so for me, I had a couple and they asked me specifically for their ceremony. They were going to have close to the maximum amount of people that you're allowed to have like all together, which I believe at the time was 100 people outside, and that includes your vendors. So they were very conscious about that, which you have to be. But their ceremony, they had, usually where this venue is, it's a country club and they have a gazebo and that's where everybody gets married at. It's super cute. But they have everybody like kind of packed in and it looks, I mean, you can fit 100 people there easily, but you're side to side to side. So what they actually did is there is an elevated area that is, I would say about 15 feet away from like the main area. So they literally just spread people out. So they had the first 2 rows were family that were already next to each other anyways. Those seats were all together. But then as you went back, people got more and more and more spaced out. So in the end, so by the time you were in the back, each person was like, I think 3 or 4 feet apart, like individually. But it was funny because they were like, no, I heard 0 complaints about that wedding. They were like, oh, yep, totally understand. I'm not sitting right next to my husband. I am A-okay. I'm sitting here in my seat. I'm watching the ceremony. I'm here for the couple. I am so happy.
Yeah.
I think another thing that's worked out really well, especially for just COVID in general, has been the wristband thing. I don't know if you've seen it, but people will put different wristbands out. Yeah.
I have. I haven't done it for any of our events. We thought about doing it for the holiday shop hop, but being that we didn't do it in person, that we didn't. But I really love the idea of it, to see what you're socially comfortable with. I love that idea.
Yeah, so the overall idea is you see what you're socially comfortable with, like you said, but there are different colored wristbands, and you basically think of it like a stop sign. So like red being, hi, no, I do not want anybody near me. Yellow being, I'm okay with talking to people, and green being, no, I'm okay being on the dance floor, or whatever. But that way, you know, like a person's level of comfort based, and they don't have to tell you necessarily, because sometimes it's very awkward to be like, oh, yes, I'm so excited to see you. Please also stay away from me.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, but get away.
Right.
Or like, don't like take your mask off and start drinking your drink while you're talking to me. Like, keep your mask on, and then afterwards, if you could take your drink or something. Like, it's important to let people know what you're comfortable with. 100%.
Yeah, exactly. And it's important to make sure that you're being respectful of every person too. And that way the couple, because like sometimes people change their mind like the day of, even the couple who's going around and greeting people could be like, oh, okay, I'm using a name, Aunt Marjorie all of a sudden has decided that she does not feel comfortable being around people. We will wave at her from 6 feet. We love you, but we're going to move on. We're not going to like invade.
We're not going to hug.
Right. You're not going to hug.
We're not going to hug right now.
From afar, and that'll be great.
Yeah.
But I think especially when it comes to weather, it can be a little bit more difficult, which is also why I think 2020 was the year of the tent.
Oh, absolutely. There was more tented weddings because that's the only way you could have one.
Exactly, yeah. But it works out really well for weather, because like in October, I had a wedding out by the lakeshore at St. Joe. And they had a clear top tent, which normally would be absolutely gorgeous. You'd see the stars if there were stars. It'd be beautiful, right? It rained. It rained so hard on them during their reception, but because of the tent, they were totally fine. And they were like, well, it's kind of like more ambiance music that's just kind of adding into everything. It's really quite fun. And then the photos, I loved the photos because a cleared top tent, I mean, you just can't beat that when it comes to raining down on things. But
yeah, well, you didn't have to worry about over sun exposure either, because that could be a factor, like a greenhouse effect, right?
Yeah.
Instead of having greenhouse effect with like all this light coming in and heating it up really fast, instead it was just like overcast and rainy, which if you've ever been in a greenhouse when it's raining, it's like therapy. Like, it sounds so beautiful just hearing the sound of the rain falling. If it was more thunderstorm, then there'd be a lot more concerns to be like, get me out of this metal tent, because it's just giant metal rods sticking up in the air. I think there's only been one wedding that I've had where it was thunderstorming, but it did it before the ceremony and the reception. So it was like a thank goodness moment. Yeah. Thank God moment. But it's a little concerning if you had more thunderstorm, severe weather. Like at that point, it's like, what do you do? Do you figure out, like, do you send guests to a hotel? Can you take things to a hotel? You know, can you contact them and have that be a backup plan? A lot of people don't think of like, oh, tent is like our solution and that's it. But it's like, but what if there was like, I mean, obviously there's a tornado. There's a lot more things to worry about than being in a tent. Just get the heck out of there. But mostly like if there was a thunderstorm, which there's a lot of thunderstorms in Michigan, so it could very easily happen. Like, do you feel comfortable yourself and your guests being in a thunderstorm in a tent that doesn't protect you? It's just plastic with metal rods. So it's not like the inside structure of a house where you're protected. So it's like, what do you do in those circumstances? Or do you just call it at night, unfortunately, or you ask people to go to their cars until you're ready to go back in? You know, like there's a lot of factors to work out there, and it can be really induced by weather. Plus with COVID, you can't do what you normally would do. It's just like, let's be inside of a building. We couldn't do that last year.
Right. And actually, so it's really interesting that you say that too, because their venue was actually a restaurant, and then literally right next to it was a hotel where most of the guests were staying. Okay. It was all within walking distance. So they had already said, like, if it does start thunderstorming, we're going to ask the guests in the hotel to go back to the hotel until they get the call. Who's ever not here can either go back to their car or into this little area for into the restaurant, because you can have a certain number of people in the restaurant. And even the restaurant had like different levels, so that way people could still be spread out.
Yeah.
They gave them like full access to the whole restaurant. It was very cool. But they did plan for if it was thunderstorming. It was just raining, which is very good.
Yeah, it's an important factor. It's nice that they had that where guests were staying right next to it. Yeah. Because instead of them like having to call their cell phones too, you could simply call the hotel and ask them to call all of their guests that are checked in their room blocks too. Because if have their phone on silent because they were just at your ceremony or something, you know, like that's nice for the added communication factor to it too.
Oh, very much so. All right, well, that's all we had for today.
Yes, it is. Yep. So we want you to make sure that you have a few contingency plans. I say you can never plan enough, but that's also the planner in me. But yeah, you should have like a plan A through D. And a lot of people are like, I feel like I don't know what to plan for right now because of COVID. It continues to change. Right now, we're not really having events inside because you can't have very many people. And we've actually been discussing what the current regulations are because it keeps changing in Michigan.
It does.
Right now inside, I don't think it's very many. I know some places can have up to 100 people in them, but that's more as like how much your capacity is. You can only have 25% of whatever your capacity is. So if it's 200 people, you know, you can only have like 75 people in there. So
right, and it depends on the square footage that you have available as well.
Correct. So we've been doing a lot of investigating now of like, what does it currently look like in Michigan for the current regulations? Because they've changed a lot since last fall where we could be outside. There's so much that keeps changing. So
yes. But that's all for this week. If you have any questions, obviously always reach out. We love answering questions. But Absolutely. Next week we are talking all about what can you get rid of at your wedding. It'll be very fun. But stay tuned for next week and we will talk to you then.
Bye.
Bye.